The most important song in the history of dance music was an afterthought. It was the last track on the album, a throwaway experiment built on a borrowed machine that wouldn't even stay in tune. The biggest star in disco heard it and hated it. She said it sounded like popcorn. And when the record company finally released it, they hid it on the back of a single, behind a ballad nobody remembers. That afterthought didn't just become a hit. It invented the future. House music, techno, synthpop, every electronic beat you've heard in the last 50 years, all of it traces back to this one buried experiment. A producer named Brian Eno heard it once and ran into the room shouting that he'd heard the sound of the future. This is the story of how a bonus track nobody believed in, sung by a woman who couldn't stand it, quietly rewrote all of music. Chapter 1: A Queen in a Foreign City. To understand this song, forget America for a minute, because it wasn't born in New York or Los Angeles. It was born in Munich, Germany. That's where Donna Summer was living. She'd moved there years earlier to perform in the stage musical Hair, stayed on as a session singer, and fell in with two producers working out of a basement studio, an Italian named Giorgio Moroder and an Englishman named Pete Bellotte. Together in 1975, they'd already made history once, a steamy record called Love to Love You Baby that turned Donna Summer into the queen of disco overnight. So by 1977, this was a team at the top of its game. And then they decided to do something strange, something that, on paper, made no commercial sense at all. They decided to build an entire album around a gimmick, and the gimmick is what accidentally changed everything. Chapter 2: The Album That Traveled Through Time. The idea came from Bellotte. He just read a series of novels called A Dance to the Music of Time, and he wanted to make an album that did exactly that, travel through the eras of popular music. So every track on I Remember Yesterday was written to sound like a different decade. One song was 1940s swing, another was 60s girl group pop, then 70s funk, then contemporary disco. The whole record was a guided tour through the past, and that left them with one problem. If the album was a journey through time, it needed an ending. It needed the future. So Moroder and Bellotte asked themselves a question almost nobody in pop music had seriously asked. What would music sound like 10, 20 years from now? Moroder had just seen Star Wars, and he was unimpressed by the alien cantina band. It looked like the future, he said, but it didn't sound like it. He thought he could do better. They made one rule for the final track: no orchestra, no real instruments at all. The entire song, every single sound, would be made by a machine. A nostalgia album about the past needed one song about the future. That one song is the only one anybody remembers. There was just one small issue with building the future out of a machine. They didn't actually own the machine, and the one they borrowed was a nightmare. Chapter 3: The Broken Machine. The machine was a Moog modular synthesizer, a wall of cables and dials the size of a refrigerator. In 1977, almost nobody knew how to make a pop song with one. Moroder and Bellotte didn't even own one. They had to borrow it from a classical composer named Eberhard Schoner, and the synth was so complicated they had to hire his engineer, a young man named Robbie Weddle, just to operate it. Weddle knew a secret almost no one else did: how to lock the machine's parts together in perfect sync. Even Robert Moog, the man who built the thing, didn't know it could do that, and the machine fought them the whole way. It drifted out of tune every few minutes. So they couldn't just play the song, they had to record it in tiny bursts, 20 or 30 seconds at a time, then stop, retune the whole monster and drop back in. Moroder called it a disaster. Here's the detail that tells you how radical this was. On the finished record, there are only two sounds a human being actually played. One is Donna Summer's voice. The other is the kick drum, because the machine couldn't make a convincing one, at the record company thought. Chapter 4: Buried on the B-side. When it came time to release a single, the label didn't choose I Feel Love. They chose a ballad, a safe, conventional song called Can't we just sit down and talk it over? That was the A-side, the song they were betting on, and I Feel Love, they printed it on the back. The B-side, the afterthought of an afterthought. The ballad did fine. It scraped onto the R&B chart and faded. By every normal rule of the music business, that should have been the whole story, except a few people had already heard the B-side. And one of them was about to say something that turned out to be a prophecy. Chapter 5, The Sound of the Future. At that exact moment, in another studio in Germany, David Bowie was making one of his most experimental albums with the producer Brian Eno. They were searching deliberately for a brand new sound, something nobody had made before. And one day, the story goes, Eno came running into the room holding this record. He told Bowie, "I have heard the sound of the future. This is it. Look no further." And then he predicted that this one song would shape the sound of club music for the next 15 years. He was wrong about one thing. It wasn't 15 years. It was forever. Because out on the dance floors, the same thing was happening that always happens when the experts get it wrong. The crowd found the B-side. The clubs couldn't get enough of that relentless electronic pulse. And the record company had to do the only thing left to do, flip the single over and re-release I Feel Love as the A-side, where it belonged all along. This time it didn't just chart. It hit #1 in the United Kingdom, #1 in country after country across Europe and beyond, and #6 back home in America. The afterthought had taken over the world. The ballad they bet on is forgotten. The song they buried became #1 on 3 continents. Chapter 6, The Future It Actually Built. But the chart numbers are the smallest part of this story. Because what I Feel Love really did was open a door that has never closed. Listen to Blondie's Heart of Glass. A year later, that's this song's DNA. The synth-pop explosion of the 1980s, Human League, Sparks, Simple Minds, they were all chasing this record. The high NRG sound, the gay dance anthems of the AIDS years, where the song became a banner of survival and joy, that's here too. And then it went further than anyone could have dreamed. The founders of techno in Detroit put this record on and never took it off. House music, techno, trance, the EDM that fills stadiums today, pull the thread on any of it, and it leads back to a broken Moog in a Munich basement in 1977. In 2012, the Library of Congress added I Feel Love to the National Recording Registry, preserved as a piece of human history. That same week, Donna Summer passed away. She never got to see her popcorn song crowned as one of the most important recordings ever made. The afterthought on the back of the record didn't predict the future of music. It became it. So the next time someone tells you disco was disposable, that it was a fad, a joke, something to be laughed at, remember this. The single most futuristic record of the entire era, the one that fathered modern electronic music, came out of disco. The thing they mocked is the foundation everything else was built on. A nostalgia album needed one song about the future. A star sang it in one take and hated it. A record company hit it on the B-side. And 50 years later, the whole planet is still dancing to it. Now we want to hear from you. Which disco record do you think was decades ahead of its time, the one history still hasn't given enough credit? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one, and the best ones become the next video.